Now my notifications won't show up there or anything, will it, when it's
Nope,
on? All
nope.
right. I just want to make sure before they start going,
Yeah, no,
something
you're
goes
good.
off.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons too that I use this because it doesn't show anything on your side. The only
Okay.
thing that it shows is literally like your webcam and stuff, like you talking.
Okay.
All right, you think you're ready?
I'm ready if you are.
All right, man. All right, guys, welcome, episode 10. Got the lieutenant in here. Is it McGinnis? Is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah, man. Eric McGinnis.
Eric McGinnis. Okay. I didn't want to butcher that the whole entire podcast. That's like the worst thing. I grew up with that like my whole entire life. Like my last name's Hostetler, and I don't think I ever had a substitute teacher actually call me by my last name. So, so I know what that's like. All right, man. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go ahead and we'll get into your career.
All right. So my name's Eric McGinnis. I'm a lieutenant with the Montgomery Fire Department. Uh, I joined the fire department in Montgomery in 2010. I'm a third generation firefighter. My grandfather actually still serves as the safety officer on our fire department. My dad was the deputy chief at the fire department for many years, and then he moved out of the area where he's a firefighter at the Oak Hill Fire Department, and he's the Nicholas County Emergency Management Director. Um, I've been this is this September will be 13 years for me. Um, like I said, I've grew up around the fire department. I've been through the fire department my whole life, and it's pretty much all I know is the fire department.
So, third generation, huh? Man, that's kind of a lot of pressure there, right?
Yeah,
A lot of shoes to fill there, man. Um,
yeah. I get it all the time with my dad. We They always mess with me about that, and it's just kind of humbling. And when you have that expectation, and it's a good thing that they think of your family the way that they think of you. It's a good thing.
Absolutely. You can make or break that, right?
Yeah, you can. It's up to you whether you roll with it or you break it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, whenever people see that last name, out in the fire scene, they that represents your whole family. I mean, it doesn't matter how good, of a firefighter your father or grandfather were, you know, if people haven't been around them, right, during their times and they just see that last name on the back and they say, "Wow, this guy's an ass clown," right?
Yeah, that's
That
exactly
doesn't
right.
matter. Yeah, I mean, you literally just threw everything that they did good into the dirt.
That's exactly right. I'm a firm believer in that. You got to make your own path, and you can't rely on your parents or everything like that. You just got to make your own path and make the most of it. You can't rely on everybody else.
No, I fully agree with you on that. Yeah, so like I'm for my parents, none of my parents have ever been in any kind of emergency services. No grandparents, nothing like that. So it was a new experience to me, and um, it's a little rough too. I mean, especially not knowing anybody, kind of getting into it. It's not that I didn't know anybody. My wife, she's like fifth generation.
Yeah.
They've been
Oh
around
well.
for a long time, and yeah, like her grandparent, great great grandpa, had some, was in the works of starting a fire department and stuff like that. So a lot of history there. Um, but it's still coming from the outside, right? People don't really know what to expect of me.
Yeah,
And
I fully get
you gotta really put in the work to make these guys realize that you're worth actually putting some time and effort into.
I agree 100%. You can't, like we was talking about, you gotta build your own path, and you gotta show people that you're willing to do the stuff that everybody else isn't willing to do.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, you know, especially just like standing around in the fire scene. That's like one of like the worst things that I think that like you can do, right? I mean, especially when you have guys that are in there working themselves to death, and you have other guys standing in the yard talking.
Yeah,
Um,
I understand fully how that goes.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, and guys don't really realize that just because you see some guys doing it, doesn't mean that it's okay, right? I mean,
Yes, for
especially when you're
sure.
new. I mean, when you're new, I mean, guys really see you over there working hard, and that's what they remember you by. I mean, I've been on fires with a bunch of different guys, and sometimes you get that rare occasion where you see some guys you haven't seen in a while. Well, I don't remember the first, the second, the third time I ever seen them. I always remember the last time that I seen them, and if they were standing in the yard being a bunch of lazy fucks, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's kind of what I remember them by. Is like, yeah, they'd be like, that guy? I'm like, yeah, the fuck guy standing in the yard every time I see him.
yeah. Nobody really, no, I always believe nobody really pays attention to the people that are actually doing things
No,
because they're off doing things, but everybody notices the people that's standing around not doing anything, and that
no,
sticks with you.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, um, I don't think that people realize that, and I also don't think that they see, you know, they don't see it from the public's point of view either, right? When someone's house is burning down, actively burning down, and there's like 15 guys in the yard standing, and there's four guys over here, that's actually trying to make an effort to get this house out, and the homeowner's like, what the hell is going on, right? Like, what is going on? I mean, it's not the time or place to have a social event. I mean, there's times for that after, not when there's an active emergency going on.
I fully 100% agree.
So third generation, so grew up in the firehouse.
Yes, sir.
So what was that experience like, right? I mean, that I didn't get that experience. I mean, I came in, um, I think I was 22 years old when I got into it. I'm 28 now, so I've got a little bit of time in. But I was that new feeling of being around. I mean, I feel like even people that aren't firefighters, everybody loves the trucks, right? There's
Oh,
nothing more
everyone.
exciting than seeing, an engine or, a ladder flying by with the lights and the sirens and the cue blaring. And, they're just like an adrenaline rush you get without even being on the truck. And
Oh, for sure. I was, like I said, I was fortunate enough to be around the fire department at a very young age. It was, all I can say that our family at the Montgomery Fire Department has always been a close knit fire department. A lot of our families have grew up together, surrounded by people. So I was fortunate enough to have a solid background with a lot of solid firemen, and I've been taught along the way, and um, I was very blessed with a lot of chiefs that, even under the age of 16, put the time into me, kept me involved, made me feel a part of the fire department. I think that goes a long way. I think if you can make these kids feel comfortable, feel part of the fire department, make them be involved, I think it continues to grow their um, confidence. I think it gets them more involved and more wanting to be a part of the fire department. So that went a long way with me, um, and also as a kid, if my dad had a call, I'm trying to find him to get out the door to chase him down so I can go and just watching the fire trucks. I've always lived in town near the fire department, so I've always got to see the trucks roll out and they're in town. I'm following them on my bike trying to see what's going on, and just that's the life of a kid wanting to be a firefighter, getting to experience things like that. And I think that goes a long way and it can help you build into the firefighter that you are.
yeah, no, I definitely fully agree. Um, yeah, I think I always try to put myself in a new person's shoes, right? Come into the firehouse. It takes a lot of guts to come to the firehouse, anyways, and even, to put an application in. It takes a lot of guts to even want to become a firefighter to begin with, right? You know, very dangerous thing to do. And, I think that I've seen it firsthand. We've got to be better at welcoming, these people in. I mean, it's a very awkward thing when you first show up at the firehouse and everyone's like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" Right? And I mean
Exactly.
that's we need to have and it's so weird that it's like that too because it's a very like tight knit family when you're there when everybody knows each other. But when like somebody doesn't know somebody and they first come in, they just get like this big like shadow thrown over top of them, and they just kind of feel like they're you know like an outsider.
Yeah, and I think that's so we're somewhat of a small community. We're a combo fire department.
Hmm.
Our in the early '90s, in the mid '70s to the early '90s, our fire department was 24/7, 365 with three guys. Um,
Hmm.
After the '90s, um, you know, things changed. We've had one man on duty Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, and currently still today have one man on uh, from Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. This time it just happens to be our chief who serves as the paid man. Um, he he was the paid man and then got moved into the chief's position, so he stayed as the paid man. So we always I feel like that's a helpful around here. We have somebody who's here all the time during the week. Doors are open. It's good when doors are open. People can stop in, see how things are going, and we're blessed to have a lot of our guys on our department are career guys. Um, so it's a most of the people that you see are joining these local fire departments around our area or small town fire departments are family members, people who've, you know, hang out with these firemen and, we talk them into, wanting to be a part of things. But most of these people around here are family, generational firefighters.
Okay. Yeah. So not really the way around here. I mean, we have what two paid fire departments like really close, like Granville, but like nobody ever leaves down there. Barely, unless something pretty decent opportunity comes. So they never really hire. Morgantown, yeah, like that's it's a different story. It's just a matter of I think that guys get into firefighting to fight fire, and the workload just not really there. I think like 90% of their calls are medical, and so like a lot of people don't really go that route. Clarksburg, Bridgeport, both great departments, but it's do you want to drive 45 minutes to get there? So the, with there only being very limited paid opportunities here, we do get like some of those non um, traditional like firefighters joining people that are just like like some juniors or I there's a department that has a few auxiliary members that actually go to the local high schools and do like a kind of like an outreach to kind of get kids involved with their fire departments. Like they get the kids, find out where they're closest to and try to get them set up with the fire department. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Um, but so sometimes we do get those kids that have no clue what's you know the function of a fire department is other than putting the hot stuff on putting the hot stuff on the wet stuff, putting the wet stuff on the hot stuff, right? So they just kind of understand the fire, but they don't look at all the other work that goes into that. That's like 5% of it. The other 95% is, the mate taking care of the truck, taking care of the department, the trainings. I don't think people realize that even as volunteers, we're required to still have these same certifications, the paid firefighters do.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
you
Uh,
just go to volunteer, they just don't let us run in the building. They're they're volunteer, we don't care.
yeah, I feel like, we've worked hard and to kind of take that step away from that. I see it more and more now, and in this area. So our fire department sits on the Fett County, Kanawha County line, so we deal with fire departments from both ends, and I feel like you know, for the most part, we work together. And I know, in the heart of Kanawha County, you see a lot of the paid fire departments involving the volunteer fire departments now. So I think we're doing good of taking that next step as opposed to what it used to be. But you know, we kind of went down a path where, we always had a ton of people here because we had our college here, West Virginia Tech, and
Hmm.
we we would take in tons of college kids come into town here and they would want to be firemen, or most of them have already been firemen. So we take them on to the fire department. It helps our membership. We're getting trucks out left and right. We lose our college, we lose our high school. Our high school goes to consolidates with another high school. So you just don't get
Mm.
those incoming people that you counted on, 5 to 10 years ago when you had that fluctuating people, students in and out.
Right. Well, yeah, I fully understand that. I feel like as time goes on, and statistics do show that obviously the volunteer rate's down, right? Even on the career side, they're begging for people, and they're just, I think, I hate to say it, but like sometimes kids these days are just lazy, right? It's hard
Yeah,
to
I
get them
mean,
outside. I mean, technology's kind of ruined that that aspect of wanting to be outside rather than sitting inside, right? I mean, when I was a kid, uh, I play. I think I played on my Game Boy, right? And I mean,
yeah,
we had the little light that you attached to it, and it went down river top of it, and you could still barely see shit. So I mean, when it was time to go outside and be able to play and stuff, I mean, I was all over it because I don't want to sit inside. Now kids have $1,200 iPads that they're sitting here watching videos on all day. Like I go to restaurants now, and kids aren't even aware of what's going on around them, because they don't even eat nothing. They're just sitting there on the iPad. So I think as we go, we're going to keep seeing, things are changing, right?
yeah,
Things are, but like for the worse. I mean, and we feel it. We feel it a lot at our department. Uh, even as far as, guys that's been around for a long time, they don't have the time to do it anymore.
yeah, and that's the situations you run into with the volunteer fire department. You're available or you're not available. You can't do anything about it. If they're there, they're there. If they're not, you have to go on and continue doing what you're doing. Whether you have two people or 20 people, they expect you to get the job done, and you got to find a way to get the job done.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I know that Joey teaches some classes, and I feel like departments, you always, for the most part, know with the structure fire, you know who's going to show up, right? For the most part, shit happens. You may not have one or two people, but you know, things are changing. There's even guys that used to come around all the time that don't come around for even fires now. So when you get that first truck on scene, you're learning to, I feel like we're kind of evolving. I'm trying to think of the wording, how I wanted to word that. Like we're always feel like we're a few man under, right? No matter what. Like
Mm.
we're doing a job with that will require 4 or 5 people with 2 people, 3 people most of the time. Um, Now I know you guys feel that for sure. Especially you have one paid guy, so you have a driver, right? I assume that
Yeah.
that's kind of what his job is.
Yeah, well, he's the chief, so he's ultimately responsible. But
Right, right, right.
it kind of our situation's a little different. We have a
Mm-hmm,
lot of guys on our fire department that own their own businesses or can stray away from things that are going on.
mm-hmm,
Like I said, we have a bunch of paid guys on our fire department, so you may be at a time where they're not on shift and you get all of them, but there may be a time where they're all on shift and you don't get none of them.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it just depends on that. But I feel like we get a good job. We do a good job of getting things done, and that's basically what it boils down to. Um, the public doesn't care. They don't know who's on your truck. They don't know if you have your best people in your truck, but they don't care if you have the best people in your truck. They expect you to get the job done, whether no matter what who's on the truck or what happens. As a fire department, I feel like you should expect to be able to get things done regardless of the situation. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult, but you just got to adapt and make things happen.
Right, yeah, like, only as strong as your weakest link, right? I mean,
That's exactly right.
and I mean that's why try to good to make sure that everybody that's expected to be on a truck is on top of their game. That everybody has the proper training and knows the layout of the truck. You know, like that. Those
Yes.
crucial moments matter, right? I mean, when you
Yeah.
see a guy look like they're um literally running around the track, around the truck looking for stuff. And you're like, what are you looking for? They're like, I'm looking
Yeah,
for this. And you're like, dude, it's right here. Oh, okay. It's like,
yeah, that's right,
it's,
man. I just, I think that boils down to, are you doing this because you want to do this and you want to be good at it and it's what you like to do? Or are you doing it because, hey, I'm on the fire truck, look at me, and now I
yep,
make everybody else look bad because I don't know where this is or I don't know what I'm doing.
in it for the t shirt.
Yep, that's what it pretty much boils down to. So, and I think for the most part who those people are, and you know what you're going to get from your people when you're around them all the time,
Hmm.
and it's a real how do I put this? It's uh pretty much just to put it, you know what you're going to get from people,
Yeah, you
and
have expectations for people that right from the get. Like like there's certain people that I know that if we're to fire, I know that some of the like I know that their capabilities with certain things are not there, right? And uh, at the end of the day, if they at the end of the day, you can only harp on somebody for so long to try to fix it or try to work at it to get better, and then eventually I in my mind kind of write them off because then my expectations for known that if there's an actual emergency that I can't rely on them, which is like that
yeah,
if I was in that situation and somebody felt like that about me, I'd try to fix it. But some people don't have that mindset that they have that, and I've heard this before. Oh, we're just volunteer. Well, no, we're not just volunteer because I always say, when someone calls 911 and they say my house is on fire, the dispatcher does not say, okay, we're going to go ahead and send a volunteer fire department. They don't say that. These people don't care. Like you said, they don't care that you're volunteer. They don't care that you've had a bad day. They don't care, what is going on in your personal life. They have their own emergency that they are calling that they need your help. And, all the other bullshit goes out. You should go out the window with that.
yeah. I mean, 100%. You can't stray. There's a thin line between those two, and you can't stray from that line. What's right or what's wrong, and you know, ultimately, our job is to make their to make their situation better, and yeah, I think that's a touchy subject for a lot of people. I think it is a big strike to people's egos, and they want that pat on the
Oh,
back and the look at me type thing, and you know that's not what it's about. And to some people it is. That's what it's about. But ultimately, it just boils down to, and I want my my main goal as a fireman, right? The where I'm at right now, I want people to be able to look at me and tell me and know that anything they tell me to do, I'm going to do, and I'm going to get the job done. And that's my and I feel like that's the way everybody should look at things, but that's not how everybody looks at things, and that's just how things go. But you want to you want to you want those firemen, you want to surround yourself with those firemen that you can look at and say, "Hey, I need this done," and you don't have to worry about them doing it because they're going to do the job and that not have any issues with it.
yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I fully 100% agree with that. It's I'm not an officer. I haven't haven't got up to that yet. Working towards it, it's not something that I want to jump into. It's a lot of responsibility, right? I mean, Pete guys are looking at me that if something's wrong, I need to be the guy to be able to make the decision on how to fix that. So that's something that you obviously just can't hop into.
Yeah, and
Um,
I feel like that's another touchy thing. Like, I became an officer at 21 years old, so they're looking at me. These older guys, a lot of times in the volunteer fire service, these older guys, they don't want to hear what you have to say. They don't want to look at the way you do things. And I feel like, if you earn that, and it's not a we don't it's not a our chief appoints our officers, so it's not something where we're voting on our officers, as a membership. Our chief appoints it. If our chief thinks that you're ready to be an officer, then that's what it boils down to. And I don't think, I think, sometimes that routes, you know, in the volunteer service, I think it's a double-edged sword. Like, hey, let's make this guy an officer. He runs calls. He's here all the time. But when it comes down to it, can he make that crucial decision? Can he do that? And at 21 years old, that was a hard thing for me to, accept. Like, are these guys gonna listen to me? Are these guys gonna follow me? Do they think that I have what it takes? And unfortunately, with the fire department that I'm at, I didn't have any issues. I'm surrounded, like I said, with some top-notch firemen, and they pointed me in the right direction, and they know that I was ready, and they don't, they didn't hesitate, and that was a very, very humbling, just very proud moment, when those guys when those guys expect to you to do what you do, and they know that you're going to get the job done, so they feel confident with you to put you in that position.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think that yeah, I I've seen that firsthand before, right? The being younger and you kind of like not wanting to step on people's toes, but also like, hey, this isn't the '80s anymore. That we don't do things the same way that you guys used to do them back then. Technology's evolved, right? I mean, we're not fighting the same house fires. That even getting into different, like infrastructure in town and stuff now. I mean, the way that these houses are being built is they're being built with popsicle sticks, and
Yeah,
yeah, and it's totally different. And literally, these fires that we're fighting now, you might as well have 700 gas cans inside because everything you look at is fuel. A couch. I mean, look at couches now. I mean, you literally drop a cigarette on them. 5 seconds, the whole couch is up. Things
yeah,
aren't made of solid wood anymore. Everything is cheap composite, and things are burning hotter. Things are getting hotter way faster. Um, like what 40? I believe they said 40 years ago. You know, probably statistically it's probably a little bit further back now. You had 40 to 45 minutes to get out of a house fire in a two-story house. Now it's down to 4 to 6 minutes, I think, something like that, right? In a modern day two-story house, and it's crazy to see because it like I always try to tell guys that I'm not trying to take it away from them, the things that they did, but we're fighting different fires. Like this is a little bit of a different ball game sometimes. Um, Same concept, just different conditions.
yeah. I think that, like I agree, but things are different because like you said, the building construction, man.
Absolutely.
They're
Yep.
just things aren't built the same. 90% of your house is synthetics, like plastics, things like that.
Hmm.
And it's just, you know, it doesn't take these couches, these chairs, these things like that. It doesn't take them no time to go off. Most of the fires you're going to now, they're fully developed by the time you're stretching, things like that, flashed over, things like that, Um, so like you said, it just comes down to, building construction. There's not, I just, I think that's something you just have to put the time in to, learn the buildings in your area, which
Absolutely.
ones are your, new construction, your old construction, what these things are built with, and, what are these occupied houses and things like that. So, yeah, I agree. I don't know, it's a little different, like we were talking about career to volunteer. These career guys are getting out in 2 minutes, and they're on scene. They get to these fires fast, and they just stop them in their tracks.
I do.
Even sometimes, they are 2 blocks away from the from the firehouse, and they're having fully developed fires when they pull out of the fire station. And it's just most of the fires you get to now are 3/4 involved. And it's just because the houses are loaded with plastics and synthetics. That's
Mm.
just the day we live in nowadays.
Yeah, I mean sometimes the house is flashed by the time you've got there, right? And really, really puts you behind. So third generation firefighter. Now, did your department, you started out as a junior? Did your department have a junior
Yes.
program?
Yeah. So our junior, so 16 years old, go through a junior program. You go through the go through the junior status, and then once you become 18 years old, they'll vote. They'll decide whether they think you're ready to join the fire department as a full-time member, and then you'll go through 8 months of probation, and it's all from there. But like I said, I've been I was fortunate enough to be brought up around it, and then um, so yeah, it wasn't the day that I turned 16 just happened to be on a Monday night, so I got voted on my 16th birthday. So it was pretty neat, and I thought that was thought the world. I thought I was the greatest thing on earth when I got voted on the fire department. You know,
Yeah, it's
a lot of people don't. A lot of people, kids at school, in high school, they think they don't think nothing of it, or oh, this guy's a fireman. Uh, he gets to leave school to go on fire calls. Maybe we should do that. They don't understand, or they think it's a joke until we talk to these people and get them involved. So yeah, I feel like that was a proud accomplishment, and it was something I could always look back on.
yeah, no, that's so 16 years old. I know you started out kind of. I know that's a little while ago. Do you remember? You remember the first call you ever got to run?
I don't. I don't know. I don't remember. I know that the first call that I ran when I was 18 years old was I got to run it with my dad, so that was pretty awesome. I'll never forget the day that I caught my first fire with my dad. That was an awesome. That was I don't know that I'll ever be able to beat that experience in my life, but that was a great experience. Working basement fire, what you expect. You're
The
going to a
killer,
fire.
right?
You're going to a fire, and it's that's it.
Yep.
That's what all basement fire. You gotta get your shit together.
Yeah, it's
That's
one of
my
the worst
first
fires you can respond to,
first
right?
fire
That's
with my
one of your
dad, and
first
it was
fires.
in a townhouse in a basement. Hot. What's your typical basement fire, and I got to catch it with my dad. First fire with my dad, and that was I'll never forget that moment.
That's awesome. So, um, you when did you actually get your fire one?
Oh,
Was
I
that
got it
when
when
you
I
were
was
still a
6.
junior?
Yeah, I
Okay.
got firefighter one when I was 16 years old. So
Okay. Yeah, and then your department kind of helped you, allegedly, kind of let you help around, on calls and stuff like that. And then once you got
yeah,
18, you're really able to get into it.
yeah, just doing your typical junior things. Picking up hose, doing things like that. Just being
Yeah.
involved, just letting them keep they they're keeping you involved the way you can, and just making you feel a part. And I think
Right,
that
because that's a thin line, right? Because guys don't realize that there's definitely a gray area there on the do's and don'ts with
yeah,
your juniors, but you also have to, at the end of the day, protect the department too, right? You can't have little Timmy, the 16 years old down the street, wind up getting hurt on a residential structure fire, and then his
oh yeah,
parents turning around and suing the department. I mean, just because you feel bad for little Timmy and you want to involve him more, at the end of the day, he's got to realize that you're just trying to protect him.
oh
That
absolutely,
that's a huge thing. Um, so 18 years old, you know, that what was your mindset? Did you feel like, so 16, you got into the department, obviously were more involved than you ever were before. But then when you
yeah.
get, 18, you really start to run, you get to run these more serious calls. You really get to get into the shit a little bit. Definitely a huge kind of like a shell shock, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
you get to see these guys doing it, and then you're that guy doing it now.
yeah. I've you know I've put it back to how those officers, and my dad, the chief we have now, his name's Benny Filiaggi. No, the chief we had before that, his name was Dave Thomas. Freddie Purdue, things like that. Some guys that I really look up to, that are great firemen. I feel like they put me in a place when I was 18 years old. They knew that I could get the job done. It was great. All I got to do was ride the back step and stretch. Great. I didn't have to worry about anything. I got to worry about being a fireman. And I think that
Yeah.
that's where we lack. That's where the volunteer lacks a little bit now because of the membership. Like I don't feel like a lot of these younger kids are thrown into situations that they shouldn't be thrown in. I firmly believe that you should learn how to ride the back of the truck before you can ride the seat. And
No,
you
I
know,
fully agree. I really do agree. It's kind of crazy sometimes too that you have kids that their first fire, they're just running in, right?
yeah,
First
yeah,
fire, like first fire that they've caught since they've got, fire one, and they're going in. And it it's weird, right? Because it's not what you can ever expect. You can't ever train. You can train for what's expected, but you can only simulate a real fire so much, until they really get into it, and it's totally different. I mean, I firsthand I've seen people that really thought they're like, man, I'm gonna be a badass firefighter, and when they really got to finally start going inside, they were like, dude, this ain't for me. Right, that's a
well,
total different animal when you go in and the room's completely dark. You can't see shit.
yeah, I agree. And like I said, I was always around with my dad, and
Mhm.
you get on a fire with your dad, and he tells you, look, you're going to do this, you're going to get the job done, and you're going to take your shit and you're going to walk back home.
Yeah, yeah, some high expectations right there, right?
So, and he said that to me. He said that to me when I was younger. It's not time. It's not time to be scared. It's time to do the job, or you take your shit off and you can walk home.
Which is the way it should be, right? I mean,
And
if
that's
you're
my
not giving
dad, so he can.
100%.
Yeah, that's my dad, so he could say that stuff to me. And obviously, you're not going to say that. Say that to
Yeah,
young
yeah, yeah.
kids. But you know, I didn't have any care in the world. Get to be on the nozzle all the time, riding the back step. It was great because all you just got to be a fireman, and I like
Mhm.
that's the best days of your life right there when you get to be a fireman and you get to go to fires and you get to do other things like that, and especially when you get to do it with your people that you really look up to, and it's a great experience. And I like I said, I think that everybody should learn how to ride the back step before we throw them into situations that they shouldn't be thrown into.
I agree. I really agree. Like it seems like your department did a great job of training you. To so you were kind of prepared, right? Like you kind of already knew what was expected of you. You kind of knew how to perform the job that was expected of you. There was no, how do I do this? I'm sure of this, blah 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 blah. Like
Yeah,
whenever they were like, yo, we're about to pull up this house, we're about to stretch. You knew you're
yeah,
about to stretch the line out. I feel like one of the well, there's definitely a huge difference between the pay side and the volunteer side on this. Is and especially in departments that have low call volume, that this is even worse. Is um, you have this guy that's been doing it for 10 years. This guy's been running structure fires for 10 years. NVAs for 10 years, and still always wants to be the guy that is doing everything right. And
yeah,
a lot of our younger people, I'm a hands-on learner. I could sit in a classroom for 3 weeks and learn about something, and yes, I'm going to retain information of it, but I'm not going to fully be confident in how to do it unless I perform it hands-on. That's just the way that I am, and I feel like a lot of people are hands-on learners. And there's nothing worse when you have a guy that is always the one that, in as long as people are properly trained, I want to state that. Not that you want to allow people to perform tasks that they're not trained for. But we'll just say you go on entrapment, right? And you always have the same guy on the tools every single time. Well, if nobody else knows how to use your extrication tools, even if they're trained, there's a big difference between going and doing the training in a real life scenario. There's a lot of stress there. So if you have the same guy that's doing it every single call, eventually that guy may not be able to be around. And the
Hmm.
first time somebody has to, perform something hands on, it shouldn't probably be by themselves, right? You want to be able to make sure that you have somebody there, and you're always going to have your officers and stuff, but that even goes as far as, officers. I mean, there's some people that may be in an officer role that have always also been in that situation to where there was always one guy that did everything.
Yeah,
And
I think you do see that a lot in volunteer fire departments. But my thing, the situation I was in when I was younger is, we have officers in town. My
mhm,
dad was a deputy chief, so we knew what you were going to get from him. Back then you had older people that came in and drove and things like that. So I knew when I got on the back of the truck that it was my fire. You know,
yeah,
I live, 2 blocks away from the fire station. So I know that if I'm home, I'm getting, I'm on I'm on the first truck and I'm getting a line. And
mhm,
our older guys were good about that. They didn't take it from me. They let me have it. They threw me to the fire. I feel like that makes you a good fireman. We have some guys in our fire department right now that don't come around as much as they used to, but I know if they were here, they're going to get the job done, and there's not a single question about it. And
yeah,
you know, it's people's lives change, and they get kids and things like that. So I understand that, and but I think it boils down to how your fire department is and what your expectations of your fire department are, and if you surround yourself with great firemen and things like that, while yes, they want to be involved, but they know that they got to get you involved to teach you the things like that, and you got to want to be able to do it, and that's what it boils down to. If you want to do it, they're going to put you in a position to let you do it, and that's what if they think you can do it, they're going to let you do it.
yeah, yeah.
So
No, I agree. I agree. Yeah, because I always say, and I'm like I said, I'm 28. I'm not an old man. I'm not gonna talk like I am, but the next generation of firefighters are coming in, right? And if we don't properly train them to make sure that they are able to run the department when we're gone, then we're screwed, right? I mean, kind of just setting ourselves up for a disaster. We're not going to be around forever. So as we start to get older, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're mentoring and training and making sure that our guys are able to handle the situations because we're not always going to be around. That sounds like a you know,
yeah,
weird situation, but it's true, and not even be around as far as being dead. As volunteers, like you said, we work, and we have families, and we have kids, and we're not able to, be around as much as when we were 21, 22 years old. I mean, things definitely change, um, and
yeah,
sometimes, the younger guys do step up into those roles where they are the guys that are doing a lot more. So we
yeah,
got to make sure that they're trained.
yeah. And we're fortunate, like I said, get into some. We're fortunate. In December of 2020, we took delivery of our Draeger burn building.
Oh, oh, that's nice.
So we have a top of the line, state of the art training facility in Fett County,
That's
and
awesome.
you know it's it just opens it up for the training's there. You just got to take advantage of it, and we use it to our advantage. I feel like we've came a long way. This is what we the older generation have laid the footprint for, and now we're moving into. I'm an instructor at our training center, and we're teaching firefighter one classes, and all the things like that. And you're getting people from all across the state coming to our training facility, and it's just a big it's a big accomplishment because you just don't see it like I'm back. Don't want to say I'm biased, but we have a very nice training facility, and a lot of people are not aware of it, and it's just because we're in a location where top of the state to the bottom of the state, they have Bridgeport up there, things like that, but we have a state of the art training facility, and I feel like when you put that into perspective and you set that goal, you set the goal for your future generational firemen because you're putting that like, hey, we're putting an emphasis on training and we want to get this here
Hmm.
so that we can get these people trained and we can you do it in our own backyard.
Right. No, I fully agree. I brought up in uh a later podcast that I had was that the states and people that are in charge of the legislator and stuff is they talk about how volunteerism is down, right? And it's down and it's down and it's down. And the thing is like they're not really trying to do anything to help that. You know, there's people that are driving hours, hours, on their days off to go to trainings. They're not putting the money back into the people that are putting the time out, right? I mean, guys shouldn't be driving taking a half a day to drive just to drive somewhere, to be able to get proper training. Um, you know,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. That's a big thing, man. Our training facility is about 15 minutes from where from where my department is. It's pretty much in a general area, so it can somewhere in the middle of our county, and we have a group of somewhere around 15 people that were trained on how to use our system, and we take it as a um, So basically, like if they're doing a firefighter one or somebody from coming in, our guys are always going to be there. So it's our training facility. We pay the money for it and things like that, and we want to keep it up to where it lasts us for a long time. And our guys are trained on our system, and you know, like the city of Charleston, they just came up and did a recruit class last month, and
it's awesome.
so what it is they'll come up and they'll do everything. We don't do anything. Only thing we do is light their fires, keep their fires in check because that's how we run our system. They'll come in, they'll do anything that they want to do, however they want to train. We're just in the background, lighting their fires, keeping their fires in check and things like that for them. And they're doing real life scenarios, searching things like that. And I feel like that goes a long way. You can really get into some advanced stuff, teaching your guys that when you have a 3-story burn tower that's we laid it out the way we wanted it, and it's set up to meet your firefighter one things, your basement fires, your ground fires, your above level fires. We have a little like a simulated like strip mall on one side, and so it's a very, very nice training facility. And right now we're getting ready to be in the process of adding to it to accommodate some of our special operations in our county. We're working on um, some rope towers and things like that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with our area, but we're huge on special operations. A lot of people look at Fayette County as the special how special operation teams should work because we have a special operations team as a high angle rope team and a swift water team. And if our
Hmm.
swift water team goes out, our rope team goes out, and they'll do all the rope stuff for us. It's so we're in the gorge, New River Gorge, where we got rock cliffs everywhere.
Absolutely, yeah.
The New and Golly River. So our special operations teams, they get after it. That's what they do. It's not, they don't get our rope teams running, 5, 6, 7, rope rescues a month. And last year was our busiest swift water year. In a long time. We had a historic flood where our swift water team, we last August we rescued um, kind of crazy. Our neighboring fire department, the Smithers Fire Department, their former chief, his house flooded, and uh, we have our swift water and our rope teams coming, and myself as well as a captain on our fire department by the name of Michael Filiaggi. We as long as with Chief of Oak Hill Fire Department Timmy Richardson and firefighter Rodney Woodson uh, rescued their fire chief out of his house that was flooded, and we rescued six people that morning just right there, three adults, four adults and two kids, and so it's our area is vastly spread out when it comes to we have 17 departments, but if there's a water or a rope call in any end of the corner, those teams are going, and that you're going to get. And we use our training facility for that too. We want to incorporate everything into our training center that we might accomplish or have to run into in our county, and that's something we stand pretty stern on is training.
Yeah, it really, at the end of the day, it comes back to your training, right? I mean, especially when um, it's not as easy as just throwing on a set of bunker gear and just running inside with the hose and put putting water on the fire. There's a lot more that goes into it than just that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you run into the door and you have to be able to recognize the conditions that you're in. Should you even actually be inside of the house at that time? There's a lot of things where I know that in the past they believe that you get on scene and you just knock all the windows out of the house. Well, now it's you don't do that, right?
Yeah.
Controlled ventilation, right? There's a time and a place when you need to knock those windows out. It's just not everybody get on scene. Everybody grabs a tool and just goes ape shit on the windows, and then we'll worry about putting the fire out. Well, that we've learned, you know, from studies and fire behavior and everything that that's not a good thing. Just to go ahead and introduce fresh oxygen to that fire. That's
Oh,
not.
absolutely. Like I said, we along with our burn building, we also have a flashover can and a backdraft simulator as well as the System 64 um, propane props and propane burns. So we got it. We when we did it, we said we were going to do it right, and we got them
That's
all.
awesome.
And that way we can start, with the flashover, teaching them, how to read flashover, things like that. So we took the whole realm and put it together, and we decided if we were going to do it, we were going to do it right.
No, that's awesome that you guys, actually even had the opportunity to be able to do that. I, you know, had some good minds that got together to come up with something like that.
Oh, absolutely. And there it wouldn't be it would we wouldn't be where we're at if it wasn't for you know those guys right there. They made it happen, and they stuck with it until it happened, and they didn't take no for an answer. There's a few guys, Joe Christ, who used to be our fire coordinator. He got a lot of things rolling. You have Mike Gray. He's the chief of Anstead. That's a guy you need to get in touch with if you want to. He's the rope guy. If you know rope, he's the guy. Mark Bass. There's a few guys who really put their time into it. Every waking second they were drawing up plans. They were laying out everything. And, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in right now.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely takes a lot of special people for something like that. I like I said, I people just don't understand the time and effort that it takes into keeping a fire department going. There's a lot of things that they don't see on the back end of it. Um,
No,
you
that's
know,
exactly right.
it's not just running calls.
No, it's not at all. That's just the easy part of it, really. You know, I'm very thankful that, we have a chief that takes care of all of our finances, and, you know, they're good at that because, that's what controls your fire department right there. And, we're a very, very blessed fire department as well as a blessed county. we're sitting out in our bay right now with an 85-foot tower, you know, a 2022 brand new engine. Um, you know, we have two other engines and a rescue, a boat and things like that. And we're very blessed when it comes to equipment because, we're fortunate to have a fire levy in Fayette County, and you know, we're very blessed that our people, take the time to support the fire departments and, want to see our fire departments succeed. And, we take emphasis in our equipment and, the things like that.
Yeah, I mean you. Yeah, I mean at the end of the day, if it's not for the people of the community, you won't have you won't not even if it matters volunteer paid, right? You won't be there. I mean that's the whole purpose of why we're there is for the community. So I think that community engagement and basically letting the people of the community know that you are appreciative and you're taking care of that equipment that they're helping you purchase. That's you know most engines these days you're looking probably minimum $600,000,
Oh,
and that's
absolutely.
minimum, right? And I mean, you're talking, um, ladders. You start talking about platforms. I mean, you're getting into million and a half, $2 million sometimes. So I mean,
Yeah.
we're not doing that by ourselves. I mean, we're not doing it. We're not selling it. Up here we do a chicken dinners and we gun bashes, and
Yeah. So,
we're not doing gun bashes, and we're not selling enough chickens to be to be purchasing new trucks out here. So the people in your community, like I always said, is even though they're calling you because there's an emergency, you have to respect these people's homes, right?
oh, yeah.
I firsthand have seen fire, a fire company go in and light smoke, very light fire, and the whole the whole room of the house is just absolutely about stripped. Belongings are knocked over, stuff's just getting thrown out of the way, and it's like these people call you because you know they need your help. They didn't call a demolition man to come in and just they could have did that. They could have tore all the walls off of their out of their living room and put the fire out at that point. So you know, you got to respect people's homes and belongings. Um, you know, like everything that I always think about the actions that I take is, you know, how would I want somebody treating me, you know, if I was on the other side? You know, I wouldn't want somebody coming into my house and, completely just knocking every single knick-knack that's on the wall off and knocking stuff over just because it's in the way, right? I mean that's just not the way that I roll. I mean there's a whole entire reason that when you take your fire one class that they introduce you into salvage covers and stuff like that, right? I mean your job's not to completely do more damage to the house than the fire did. You're
Yeah.
there to protect life and property, and some people, I think, kind of forget that. They kind of just think, well, our whole job is to put the fire out. And if it comes down to tearing the whole entire room up, but then also accomplishing putting the fire out, well, that's not good to me because you didn't really preserve anything.
Yeah. We had a fire either last week or the week before, and that's what I emphasis. Let's get these salvage covers out. Let's let's respect this. It's small fire. We need to open up a little bit just to make sure, check for extension, but
Sure.
let's get these salvage covers down and cover things up. So, yeah, I understand. It is a lost art in the fire service, and I think everybody's guilty. I'm guilty of it sometimes too, as of not using salvage covers as we should. But I think
Right.
that there is definitely a time and place that you need to do things like that.
Right. Yeah. No, I, I'm guilty of it too. There's a lot of times where I don't ever think like, we should probably cover this up. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
lie. You get that tunnel vision, and you go there. What you're called for, and it's to put the fire out. I fully understand that. I do, but then that also goes back to sometimes too. Your officers, right? I mean, your officers they hold their guys accountable, and it's like, hey, listen, you know, we got to try to preserve this a little bit. I've also been firsthand on small minimum fires, and guys sit there and dump the truck on it. There wasn't really a reason to go ahead and put 750 gallons of water in this room. I mean, they're just sometimes the water does more damage than the fire did, and I don't, minimum
Yeah,
fire, sometimes minimum water, right? I mean, it doesn't shouldn't you shouldn't be dumping the truck on a stove fire. You
yeah,
know, it's kind of crazy to think, but like that does happen.
it does.
So other than instructor, you got you were around for a little bit. Started out at 18, and then you kind of dabbed into a little bit earlier, but around what 20, 21 years old, you decided that you maybe me- mentioned or hinted a little bit that you were interested in getting into a officer position, right?
So basically, it was kind of took to my surprise, to be honest with you.
Mm,
I walked in one night, and I think that some guys had hinted at him, hey, I think it's time.
yeah.
Let's take this step. And then I kind of walked in one Monday night, and my 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 helmet was laying on the table, and they said, "Here, take this home." And I said, "Why?" And he was like, "Because I got your other one in here." And they handed me my red helmet, which our firefighters wear black, our lieutenants and captains wear red, our chiefs wear white. Handed me my red helmet and said, "You've earned it. Now don't let us down. Keep doing what you do." And that was pretty much what it was. And it was a pretty awesome experience that they felt that comfortable with me at that young age.
Yeah, flattering, right? I mean, because did you feel like at the time that you deserved it? I mean, to be honest.
I mean, yeah, I think that I deserved it. I think I put my time in. At a young age, I was ate up with it. So anytime I got to go, I lived in town and I went to college in town. So I played baseball here at West Virginia Tech. So I stayed home to play baseball, and I was still being able to be around the fire department. And if there was a call, I was running it. If I was home, I'm going. And training, I was doing whatever I can. I always and my dad and them going to burn and stuff. I was always going with them and doing things like that. So I felt like I earned it, and they felt like I earned it before I felt like I earned it. So um, simultaneously, I think that they thought it was time, and um, we made they put me in that position, and that was pretty much all it was. And you know it's been great, and you always miss riding the back step. And I love coming in when our other captain or one of our drivers comes in, because I'm like, hell yeah, I get to ride the back today. Let them ride the seat. Let me get the good old days of riding the back again. And that's you always love riding the back. If you're a firefighter at heart, you're always looking to ride the back of the truck no matter what. That's just how, if you're a firefighter, that's what you want to do. And you know I'm fortunate enough to get to do it sometimes, because we got like I said, our chief works here. His son is a captain. He also lives in town. So, if he's here, I'm letting him ride a seat, or I'll drive or something like that. Just we try to take turns, and,
Yeah.
depending on who comes in, we try to not let the same person drive all the time or the same person ride the seat. We try to make it fair, and, let everybody get their feel, and just continue to do it, because we're always, if an officer's on the truck and we're stretching, that officer's going to be with whoever that firefighter is, and that's his job. So we're always attaching an officer to a line, no matter what it is. Some of our senior guys, have taken different roles in our fire department. Used to be officers and step back to firefighters. So you necessarily don't have to attach an officer to them, because they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And there's other tasks where you could do. You go work the floor or something like that. So you know, I would like to think that we know what we're going to get with our guys, so we know we know what to expect. It's putting it like that.
Yeah. So was it what you expected though? right? You went from being the guy that was responsible for putting the fire out, and then you know then that next call that you got, that you responded on, that things change, right? I mean, now
Yeah,
you're the guy that's responsible for the guy that you used to be, right, and a few other guys.
yeah. I think it was a rough, like I don't want to say rough, but it was kind of like a shock to you at first because you know um, you're like, man, I want to go in there and do this, I want to go there and do that, but now I have other tasks that I need to be doing, and we're always, you know, there our other officers or chiefs are pointing us in the right direction, telling us what they need and what they need done. So I don't want to say that it was a huge change, but there is some definite high expectations, especially when I use this as an example. I'm 21 years old. A month before, let's see, a month, no, a couple months, 2 months before I turned 21 years old, and we're sitting at the firehouse on a snowy day in February, and we get struck for a train derailment outside of town, 27 cars of crude oil, and they're blowing up, you know, thousands of feet in the air, and I'm riding the seat, and our chief's over there driving. He's telling me, I need you to do this, I need you to do this, and I'm like, man, this. I don't know how you prepare for stuff like this, and
Yeah.
I use that day as a huge learning experience. Every single person on our truck, with the exception of our chief, was 21 years old or 22 years old or younger,
Wow.
and we're going to, probably the worst call in the history of our fire department. You know, like I said, 27 cars of crude oil, laying over, demolished a couple of houses. Thank God nobody was injured or killed. But that's you got tank cars blowing up, you know, feet, hundreds of feet away from you. It's just that was a real experience right there, to say the least.
Yeah. What year was this?
2000, February of 2015.
Okay.
Uh, it was
Yeah.
a
Yeah,
it
you
was
can't really train for that, right? That's not really an
no, no,
expected.
no.
That's not really an expected. It doesn't matter what training camp you go to. There's not really a you know anything other than a real life situation for something like that, right? You can't really train for cars derailing, with explosion and stuff. That's just
Yeah,
something
that's
you don't ever normally expect to happen. So
no, not at all. And that's, like I said, it was a bad, worst case scenario. Snow, and we got a foot of snow while this stuff's going on. You got product, running into the oil or running into the river, and things like that. Fortunately enough that our fire chief had, a couple months before that, seen these tanker cars come through, and took notice of that, and contacted some people, contact our emergency management. They put a plan together. So why it was a real shell shock to a lot of people. We knew that we wasn't going to put that fire out. We knew that no matter what we did, we didn't have enough water, we didn't have enough resources to even consider touching that fire. We knew that they weren't, they were in an area, away. It already did the damage to one house, and it wasn't really near anything else after the one house that was destroyed. But we just knew that no matter what we did, we didn't have the capability of even handling that. There there was just nothing. There was no possible way we could, with a foot of a foot of snow on the ground. Water issues. That area doesn't have it doesn't have hydrants in that area, and things like that. And you're seeing
you're
fires,
trying to
like I
shuttle
said.
water. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, you're trying to shuttle water, and like you said, there's like a foot of snow on the ground, which I don't think people realize, that you're bringing what we'll just assume average tanker 25 to 3,000, 3,500 gallons of water, and they don't realize that they could be driving, you know, several miles once they dump their water to go refill, and they don't realize how much water you're actually flowing, especially on a fire like that, right? You're not, you know,
Yeah, that's not your typical fire, man. You're talking, like I said, out of 27 cars, I want to say there was around 10 to 12. I can't really remember right off my head. That was, on fire, um, you know, blue, um, things like that. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but yeah, you're talking full tanker cars full of, highly flammable crude oil, that is, like I said, highly flammable that you just can't, you know, you're talking 12 cars that are torn apart on fire. You can't do nothing with that. I mean,
that
you don't have the water. Even if you
yeah,
had hydrants and stuff right there, you don't have the water to touch that.
no, and I mean just the hazmat nightmare of that too, right?
Yeah,
Just just that's just literally like worst case scenario if you're, I I don't ever like to pride myself on being a huge hazmat guy. I don't normally if like there's some real bad shit going on like that, I'm like, yeah, actually I got to be somewhere else, right?
yeah,
So that that's not my cup of tea is the whole hazmat stuff. So I can imagine some of these hazmat techs and stuff are like, what the fuck? You know what I mean?
yeah.
Huge, decent, body of water, and then you're trying to deal with, 27 cars derailed completely full of oil, right? I mean, that's like
Yeah.
worst case scenario that if somebody was to come up with something, they literally just stacked all the cards against you. And they
Oh,
said
100%. Like
they
that's
said deal with it.
yeah, I mean, that's the absolute worst case scenario that we had. And, you know, like I said, it's absolutely hammering the snow and we're pulling out of the fire station. You can't even see five
Yeah.
feet in front of you and you make a turn, that happened about 3.5 miles outside of town. And, you know, you pull up on it and you see just ripping fire, eye level. The train tracks are, 100 feet off the road and you're eye level driving by flames and smoke, 500 foot in the air and farther than that. It was a wild experience. And, we got to learn a lot from it, from, all the way through command structure. You got the people, you got your hazmat teams, your Coast Guard because of the water and things like that. So, that was one of the calls that I ran right before, like one of the biggest call in probably our history, and like it was right before I became an officer, and I was riding the seat that day. Our chief was driving, so he was telling me what he needed me to do, but that's a tall task right there on an incident like that.
It is for sure. That is also an incident that um you really learn from, right? You learn things that you really something like that really you know picks at your weaknesses very very quickly, right? So
Oh
certain
yeah,
things that you realize that you weren't necessarily prepared for, that kind of makes you think back like, well, if that ever happens again, which hope it never does, that we'll be prepared for it. Or
oh
um
yeah, absolutely. It's the toughest task is there's a foot of snow on the ground and you have to evacuate. A community, a mile community, and you're
yeah.
trying to do this in a foot of snow while these tanker cars are blowing up right beside you. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah. They'd be like, I need you to come with me, and they're like, I don't even want to come outside. They're like, are you kidding me?
yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, that brings up a great point though that I've actually touched on before on some of my uh some of my later episodes was or previous episodes, I should say, is like you're pre-planning, right? I
Yes.
mean that's one of the most important things is for people in a leadership role is to sit down and say, if this happens, how are we going to respond to this? What kind of resources do we need? Are we equipped? And if we're not equipped, what do how do we get equipped? Or who else do we bring into this, in to to help with this situation. That's when you really start, um, you know, really talking about how you're going to incorporate your mutual aid into certain scenarios. Like uh, I see it all the time. Is you have certain departments that will not be prepared for an incident, and then when it happens, they're like, "Well, we need a ladder truck," and it's like, okay, well, little bit of a different situation when you have somebody that just drives a regular engine, and then they're not trained to drive on the ladder truck, so you may not always have somebody around that can drive it.
Oh yeah.
so
So I
so that
agree.
pre-planning goes in, right? So I think that I see it all the time. Is it's like, oh, we need a ladder truck, and it's like, okay, well, this building wasn't built yesterday or last week or last month. You've known that this is a three-story apartment complex, and that if you ever had a working fire there, you were going to need a ladder truck. It was not possible to, you're not going to be able to properly fight this thing without an aerial.
Yeah.
And why not sit down and say, okay, I know that if we have a working fire here, dispatch is automatically going to have, a truck company dispatch of this, or not even so much as a truck company. We'll just put it in the volunteer world, and we'll just say that this department knows that when they're toned out for their aerial. We don't want them bringing an engine. We don't want them bringing, a squad. We want their aerial. That's the whole purpose of them coming.
Yeah. I think we keep a book on our truck of our pre-plans,
Hmm.
and where we park and things like that.
Right? Yeah. I mean,
Just to go back,
apparatus
like,
placement is just as important as anything, right?
oh yeah, I go back. I take this back to one of the things we were talking about. You know, when we were talking back and forth before this was going on. Talk about pre-planning. I
Hmm.
This is a very proud moment of the Montgomery Fire Department. In April of 2001, our fire department rescued 7 people out of a three-story apartment complex in the middle of
Wow.
town. Um,
Good for you guys. That's awesome. That's a
you know,
definitely accomplishment right there.
yeah, they were out on some some trash fires and stuff all night.
Mhm.
What you could take that for what it is, however you think that goes. And they were sitting at the fire department shooting a shit, kind of like we are.
Yeah.
They get toned for a commercial fire right down the block, and they pull out down the street, and they see is a header blowing out of an apartment building, and they get there, and there's kids hanging out the windows.
Shit.
So my dad was a part of that. A lot of people in our fire department was still part of that. They're getting there, and they're stretching, and they see a guy holding his kid out the window, about to throw it out the window, and
Wow.
they're rescued, and that's a proud moment in Montgomery history. 7 successful rescues, and all 7 people made it. And that brought the Charleston Fire Department. They brought their ladder truck. Some other people, it ended up the building's not there no more. But the way I look at it is life over property, and they rescued 7 people, and 7 people are still alive today because of the job that they done.
Yeah. Fuck the building. I mean, at the end of
Yeah.
the day, as long as the people got out of the building, that's the most important thing, right? Is that's why people pay insurance.
Yep, exactly. And I take that back to pre-planning. Like they knew the structure of this layout. They knew that, you have basically a row, take it as a row, all these buildings are connected on Main Street, but you got to remember, like, this building has a back of it too. Like, they rescued, I want to say 5 from the back and 2 from the front. And you forget about the back, and you're focused on you forget about the back because you're focused on the front. There's 2 people hanging out windows in the back. And
Yeah. You
like
you
I said,
have to
that's a
be. Yeah.
that goes back to pre-planning. Like, and I have to go back to another. Last year we had a an old school fire in town. Um, Massive building, 3 stories, set at the end of town. It brought 4 ladder trucks to a fire. We had over 150 firefighters at that fire, and we have a tower ladder. Our next closest um, ladder trucks are, you know, the Bell Volunteer Fire Department, which is about 20 miles away in Kanawha County, the Oak Hill Fire Department, which is about 25 miles in Fett County Fire
Wow.
Department, and then another one that's about 20 miles in the Fettville Fire Department. And we brought all three of those ladders, and you know, we're the only ladder truck in the area, and we knew from the start, massive building. We knew heavy fire, fire blowing out on three different sides on arrival on three different floors. We knew that we needed ladder trucks, and they called for them right off the bat, because if you don't call for those right off the bat, like I said, we're the only ladder. We're the only one with a tower, and 20 miles is the closest to us.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like I said, um, you know, you gotta, you know, you gotta be able to have that person there to drive it, right? So I
Yeah,
mean, it's one of those things where, um, um, how was I gonna word that? Um, you know, like I said, there's nothing worse than them randomly just throwing out there like, hey, we need a ladder truck, and we have a tower, but we get it there, and we can't even set the fucker up because you know everybody and their mom has decided to park, you know literally, they ask for the tower, but they don't give us anywhere to put it, right? Like, we're not
yeah,
parking it down the street, and we're also not feeding another truck, right? I mean, 2,000 gallon per minute pump, that thing, if we're bringing it there, we're bringing it there for the purpose that, we're flowing water. We're using it for what it's supposed to be used for. And I
yeah,
mean, and yeah, they need to have an apparatus placement class. I think that whenever you go take your evoc, that should be included, because some people literally, as far as two, I mean, I've seen people park their apparatus like literally right in a collapse zone, and I'm like, what the fuck, like. Just there's a lot that goes into it. That's like, obviously a lot of people are like, man, I want to drive, but they don't realize that I had when I took my evoc, um, our instructor was sitting there and he goes, I have like one simple question for you guys, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, what's up? He's like, how do you fit 300 people into a fire truck? We're like, how the fuck do you fit 300 people in the fire truck? And so people are like, you can't, right? Like, it's impossible. How are you going to fit 300 people in it? He goes, you can absolutely fit 300 people into a fire truck. We're sitting there and we're like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Is this guy crazy? And we're like, we don't know. And he goes, every person that you pass that's on the road while you're in that fire truck is in that fire truck with you. Because if you're driving crazy, you're driving reckless, you're not doing your due diligence, you're not stopping at your red lights and making sure that it's clear. Every person that's on the road, you're responsible for. If you kill them, you're not just killing them, you're taking them away from their kids, you're taking them away from their husbands, their grandparents. That's like he explained, is everybody is somebody's son, somebody's grandkid, somebody's brother, somebody's sister. And that's how you fit 300 people into a fire truck, because it's not the four guys, the five guys that's in the truck. It's everybody that's on the road that's also, involved with that, right? So, and we're
yeah,
all like, that makes sense, right? Because people don't think about that. They just think of what they're responding to. And sometimes you really have to think. You're like, do we really need to be driving this fast, to this call? Like,
yeah.
there's
I
no
know, I
reason
know
to wreck,
exactly what.
right? If you don't make it there, then you're not helping the person that called 911. You're responding to an emergency and becoming it, you know, an emergency. You're not helping anybody by not making it there. It's
Yeah,
it's like insane to me. And we're all sitting there, we're like, man, this guy's actually not fucking crazy. We're like, this guy's actually got it. And you know, when he first said it, we're all like, this guy's fucking off his rocker. But it's true. I mean, people don't realize that when these guys get on the truck with you, then you're driving. I mean, it's not
yeah.
like
It's your
driving.
responsibility.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, everybody on the roadway is expecting, for you to be able to know how to drive. You're not going to hit them and kill them. You know, like I said, I understand that you're responding to go help somebody else that could be having the worst day of their life, but you don't want this innocent person that is just driving home from work it to become the worst day of their life because you wanted to drive like a crazy idiot.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that's just like one of my biggest pet peeves is that I see that guys just absolutely just get behind the wheel and they don't care about anything else but getting there.
Yeah, that's our roads around here aren't the best. So we, especially when you're driving $1 million ladder truck all over the place, you just can't get in a hurry, man. It is what it is. You just got to get there.
Yeah, I mean, like it's awful to say, but like if a house is on fire, it ain't going anywhere, right? It ain't gonna get up in the house, it ain't gonna run. Like I said, I know that you have to get there, but you have to get there safely. I mean, there's we're not like we're not above the law, you know.
Yeah, that's it's a real thing. It happens. Unfortunate things happen. It's a real thing. It's a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, you see that all the time, right, man? I mean, people just run intersections and they don't stop, make sure that it's clear, and boom, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah, man.
So with your I'll touch on another thing. So with your guys' training center, you guys, so it sounds like you guys invite, so it's like an open training center, right, for the county.
Yeah, it's open to anybody. So basically, what it is you know, we have people come from all over the state. You would book it just like you would anybody would call your. We have a president of our training center.
Hmm.
You would reach out to them. If it's going to be anytime we're burning up there, we have to follow the laws, follow the
Sure.
rules, and we run it through our department of, the public service training and, just PST like everybody else was. I'm sure it's WV up there. It's a lot of public service down here.
Yeah,
PST.
yeah, we have our a PST in Clarksburg.
Yeah, so
Um,
that's what we run all of our classes through that. All of them are, certified classes and things like that. We
so
did a
every
fire
is
school.
everybody considered a PST instructor?
No, no, no.
Okay,
So
okay.
there are a bunch of us that are PST instructors.
Hmm.
Um, But so when we do, the PST route is for like, our instructors are hosting their own classes and things like that.
Sure.
You still have to be a 1403 instructor. Um,
Hmm.
you have to go through all those training things, but we encourage all of our guys to be instructors, PST instructors because it, just helps us out in the long run. But we went through a training with Draeger. They came in. We have a Draeger training facility. They came in. We went through a week of training. Burns. We would burn like anybody else would. We're doing first floor burns, second floor burns, basement fires, multi-floor fires. We're going through the training to that way we can learn our systems and learn how they react. And like I said, we went through a solid week of just straight burning. And that's how we got our training, and we're trained on our system, and we are now trained to trainers, so we can train people that come in that want to be a part of it also, and help us out. But um, yeah, it's pretty awesome, man. You know it's it's, it's top notch.
No, that's like I said, it's definitely a great opportunity. It it's pretty nice to just kind of have that
Yeah,
ability, right? I mean, you're not uh that I'm not gonna lie to you. It kind of pisses me off sometimes that the only training facility that we actually have close by is in Clarksburg, right? And it's not like it's an open, like our department, or a few mutual aid departments would get together, and we'd be able to get an instructor and just have an open class, right? It's you're waiting months and months and months for them to be able to put a class on. Um,
yeah, and I think that's the fortunate route that we are down here because it's our training center. Like
Right.
we control what goes on there and what happens
Hmm.
there. Um, and we we've ran a lot of people through it. I'm not sure right off the top of my head how many people we've ran through it, but we've had a fire school last year there, and you know we run quite a bit of people in and out of that place, and it stays pretty busy, and it's pretty awesome because like I said, it's 15 minutes from our fire department. So on a drill night, we can say, hey, let's get our mutual aid companies, let's run up there, let's do some
No,
stretching,
that's
let's
awesome,
do
man.
some
It
dry
really
stuff,
is.
and things like that. And we're 15 minutes away. Somebody can slide into our department and cover for us for an hour and a half, 2 hours while we're gone.
Yeah, that is awesome, and it really is. It's really really nice to be able to have that. Um, it's like I said, some departments, with you guys having the ability to do that, it kind of you're able to train for different scenarios. You know what I mean?
Oh,
You're able to
absolutely.
train and correct weaknesses that it's hard to do inside of the garage. At your department. Out in the parking lot. Um, so no, that's awesome. Now, are you guys? Now, does your you said you guys built it, right? Like your department, you guys wanted to fund and all of that.
No, our Fett County Fire Levy funded it.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
so it's the Fett County Training Center. Our
Hmm.
over the years, they that was a strong thing that we wanted to accomplish, and um, every time we would take a step forward, we kind of would take a step back because we wouldn't have the property, or we couldn't do it in this area because the residents didn't want smoke blowing through their houses, and
Yeah,
an opportunity came up um, a stretch of land that 150 we own 150 some acres,
shit.
and our training center sits on an old what used to be an old golf course, and it's kind of like I said, countless of opportunities. We're in the process of going
Huh.
through bidding to put a um, I don't want to say fire station, but a building up there. It's going to have classrooms, going to hold a spare truck, showers, things like that,
Like
and
a proper like fire academy. It's kind of like
yeah,
what you're going for. Yeah. So what's actually awesome is we actually in my department we just actually had one of our juniors actually go to the WVU fire camp
yeah,
like a week ago, and that was my first time down there. Like I said, I didn't even get involved until I was about 22 years old. So I mean, I would have, when I first started out, I mean that would have been a crazy good experience. So I'm glad
oh, absolutely,
that they have something like that, and it sounds like that's kind of the route that you guys are going because I believe they have instructors and stuff like that they're and they have local departments bring their apparatuses, but I believe they do have a few apparatus down there themselves, that's
yeah,
dedicated to that camp. So that's awesome that it sounds like you guys are really going on the right route to be able to kind of build something that's that's your own, right? I mean, you guys can
yeah,
kind of sit back and
exactly,
say, you know, we feel like in our county we have a weakness in this, so we can go ahead and we can train on this, and then you guys are pretty proficient in
oh,
whatever kind of scenario that would come up.
absolutely, and like I said, it's you can do hundreds of things in there, the opportunities and the opportunities that we have now with that being in place are just you know mind blowing, that you sit there and you think, man, we got this, this is ours. We worked hard for this. The guys before us worked hard to make this thing happen, and like I said, it puts an emphasis on training when you are um, you know dedicated to making that happen. And I I praise the people before us that made that happen. And we're not done yet. There's still a lot of things that we want to accomplish. We're we're in the process of doing some other things. Like I said, we're trying to get some rope towers and stuff set up for our rope team. They deserve it. Like I said, I got talking into our special operations teams. Our I know you said you haven't been in it long. I don't know if you're a lot of familiar with some of the things that go on in our county, but rope and water are big two major things in our county. And our rope team, if you more than likely if you have some guys in your area or it's been a long around a while, they're familiar with the people that run our teams. And you know I go back to you're familiar with the New River Gorge Bridge.
Yep.
Our rope team rescued a guy off the New River Gorge Bridge off the side of it. That's what they do. They're good at
Yeah.
it, man. They rescued a couple years, I think 2 or 3 years ago, they rescued three people off one bridge. They had an accident on the bottom.
Hmm.
They raised these people, 200 feet up off the bridge, and they did that 3 times in one night, not the same call. They
Yeah.
went
Yeah.
to a call, got these people out, went back to the station, had another call in the same spot, and then brought two more people up in the same spot. Like, I praise our road
Yeah.
team and I praise our special operations team because they're the shit.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah. No, it's nice to recognize that you guys needed a special operation team, right? So
Oh, absolutely.
up in Mon County, we have a brush fire team. So we have guys from, I thir- I think there's 13 total departments. I think 15, including Morgantown, maybe. No, including the brush fire team and the hazmat team. So people from those neighboring departments, they're able to participate in those teams. So we have a brush fire team, and then we also have a hazmat team. And the hazmat team, they have an engine, and everything, so they're properly equipped to handle the situations. And
Absolutely.
so it's we don't, as far as have like specific rope teams, or um I mean, we don't have any water. I mean, like as far as swift water and stuff goes, we don't have like any fast, flowing bodies of water. We do obviously we have a river, Cheat Lake. They obviously have their lake. Granville Fire has now actually um, they've actually got into the diving, so they have a dive team that's properly equipped with a trailer and a boat, and I think they have 10 guys that are certified divers now. Um, so they also collaborate with Morgantown Fire for dive rescues, or um, yeah. As far as there was a scenario a few months ago where somebody was at the bottom of Cooper's Rock hanging off of a tree, and they couldn't get down off the tree, so they went and basically rescued them off the bank. So just actually having that ability to, because right, I mean, if you don't have a boat and stuff, I mean, are you gonna rope all the, you know what I mean? Are you gonna rope all the way down and get them, and then try to get them back up? So
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's
so
last.
each department is kind of responsible for, as far as like your rope rescues, your high angle, your low angle, confined space, stuff like that. Like they're all responsible for handling like their own calls per se with that.
Yeah. So basically, what happens is the area of the call that's in, they'll be dispatched to the call, and
Mhm,
automatically, like the county knows, like the fire departments know, and
mhm,
it's a good thing that we're able to work like that. We work hand in hand.
mhm,
They'll say, hey, dispatch, go ahead and send us the rope team or the water team if this is going on. And last year, I take for example, last year the Montgomery Fire Department, which I don't know how many in total, but we ran upwards of 30 water calls and we removed over 25 people from the water last year. Like
that
it's
that's awesome.
it's a big thing. Our rope team, I would be willing to say that they run upwards of 40 to 50 rope calls, and I'm not talking like your person over the bank. I'm talking,
Yeah, yeah,
these guys have fell off a rock cliff and they're 100 feet down, or things like that, and they just do it. That's what they do. That's what they're good at, and we're blessed with the um, leaders of those teams that point us in the right direction. And the county has adapted those water teams and that rope team and it's a big help that you know that you got those people in the way when you're getting started, and hey, I got people on my way. I got six more boats coming, or I got a rope trailer that's limitless with gear coming that you got to come in to help you out.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's super super nice. To now, do you guys? I'm thinking now, a year, maybe a year ago, you guys had some pretty big forest fires down there, right?
Oh yeah, so we had in the New River Gorge, actually, the
Yeah,
where
yeah.
we were
You
just
brought that
talking
up. That's
about.
why I was thinking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was pretty much I at one point, I think every fire department, we have 17 fire departments, every fire department in the county was working on this fire. And you're talking about, like I said, in the gorge, steep terrain, um, multi-million dollar houses with you know, that are 20, 5,000 square feet, monster houses that are, you have fire that are, feet away from these houses, and the jobs that these firefighters, everybody did to not losing a house, that's magnificent. Um, we had um, our our fire department was involved in another forest fire this year where a forester lost his life. That was our our fire department was that was our second due. We were actually going up there to assist with the forest fire, and this incident happened where he lost his life, and that's just forest fires were big the last year. I feel like they come in spurts, but our forest fires are lot different from, say, y'all's forest fires, where ours are straight up and down mountains terrain, and you might have some rolling hills and things like that, and it's a whole different ball game when you're talking about
It is.
forest fires in the middle of these multi-million dollar homes and things like that.
Yeah. No. Do you guys have? Do you guys don't have? Do you guys have a dedicated brush fire team, or is it
No.
that it's just a mutual aid? Everybody kind of gets together
Yeah,
and
it's
kind of
a
ties all
mutual
the
aid.
resources.
Yeah, it's a mutual aid thing. They kind of call who they need, and that at
Hmm.
that day, every they put out an all call pretty much for anybody that could help, to come
Sure.
help, with water, manpower, things like that. And it was like I said, it was a big incident. And at one point, every fire department, I think, in the county was involved.
Yeah. No. That's awesome. Uh, Now, you guys seen, like I said, you guys seen the need for a training center. I mean, when we go back to pre-planning, I mean, is that maybe something you guys will ever look at as saying, hey, this could happen again, and maybe look into maybe creating a brush fire team. I mean, that's how that happened up here was, oh God, I don't want to get this wrong. I believe it was back in the '90s. Is around when both of them, when a group of guys got together and was like, hey, we have a need for these specialty teams, guys that are trained in this, and guys that are gonna show up and know what they're doing.
Yeah,
And
I don't, I can't answer that question.
mhm,
I feel like um, we're real susceptible to things, trying new things, and working our way out, and figuring things out.
yeah.
But um, the unfortunate event where a forester lost his life,
Which
you
was
know,
awful, right? A
back,
tree, right? A tree randomly, or like he was struck by a tree, correct? Just
yes. So
okay.
that was, you know, I don't want to sound this in a, make this in a bad way, but
No, go. Yeah.
you got to, you got to choose. We have to choose our battles with our forest fires around here, man, because that kind of opened everybody's eyes around here and realize, hey, what are, we're going to help them any way we can, and do things. And this great young man who's always around our fire department was in a terrible situation, absolutely terrible. I can't put into words um, to make it better, or you know go over the situation that happened that day. But when I tell you that this wasn't a normal forest fire, this wasn't a normal forest fire, but man, this was some shit like I never seen before. And you know, the young man was in a tragic situation. And I think that now the fire department wise, we are going to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and say, hey, are we really going to throw all of our resources at this fire that's um, a half mile up on the hill and not around any of these houses? Obviously it gets the houses, we're going to take care of it, but are we really going to, put our guys in jeopardy if the situation doesn't entail for that to happen? And I know that's a touchy subject for a lot of people,
But
but
I mean, you said it right how it is. I mean, you have to, at the end of the day, we got to make sure that our guys are safe, right?
yeah,
We're not rolling up on a fully involved structure fire. I understand that there's three kids upstairs, you know,
yeah,
but at the time of the call, those three kids entrapped upstairs, or family. But it's fully involved. It's the possibility of life is not there. We're not going to send three guys in there, when it's literally not possible. It's not feasible, and I feel like we have to really weigh that risk versus reward there, right? I mean, obviously, we're going to do whatever we can to try to better the situation. Like you said,
absolutely.
like but at the end of the day, we gotta like
Like
it's
we wasn't,
property, right? To
yeah,
weigh
we
to
was,
weigh the property to a life. I mean, there's no comparison. And
oh,
obviously, I know
absolutely.
that accidents happen, and we're in a very dangerous profession. We know the risk that there's always
Yeah,
a possibility that we're going to get
absolutely.
hurt, but we always, at the end of the day, there's always that risk on the table. But the more that we can minimize that risk, we're going to. And
Yeah, and that's what I feel like happened that day. Like, you know, they were working. The forestry guys were doing their job, working. We're trying to do,
mhm,
we're helping them out, assisting, but we're
yeah,
helping them out and assisting in a different way. We're trying to keep these fire off these houses and things like that. But when this situation happened, it's all hands on deck. We're
mhm,
giving them every resource we can to help them out. So, you know, at the time that happened, there was a few firemen that were assisting them, helping them out because, they wanted to help them out, and they were the ones that let us know what was going on. It was all hands on deck. We had people coming. That was another call that automatically we sent the rope team. Um, that's a call that we wasn't sure what was going on. We're working on a hillside. We didn't know what the situation was. We send the rope team. When you get the rope team, you're getting rope, you're getting side by side, you're getting things like that. And we gave this man, this young man, a full accomplice. How much I say it? Um, a full resource list at this guy, and unfortunately, it wasn't enough. But you know, that's a thing. We're never gonna deny help, and we're never gonna not give the people the help that they need. But sometimes you just have to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and say, is it worth hiking 2 miles up straight a hillside and things like that. And like I said, I'm all about helping, and I'll do anything I can to help anybody at any time. But what happens if we're a mile and a half up on the mountainside and we get struck for an in-town fire and all of our guys are tied up on the hillside? Things like that. You have to look at the bigger picture, and I think that really opened the eyes up to a lot of people around here. You know, let's not send 20 of our guys up on the hillside trying to fight this fast-moving fire that's burning rapidly that we can't get in front, we can't do anything with. Like, we're not going to stop it even if we can, because we don't have the resources. We're straight up and down. We're fighting rock cliffs. We're doing things like that.
yeah,
Um, what are we actually doing? And that's not every fire. Like, we have a lot of brush fires that our guys get in check pretty fast and they do a good job in it. They did an absolutely fantastic job on the gorge fire and hiked up straight up and down mountains and put an absolute an absolute miracle that any of these houses didn't catch on fire.
Hmm.
But all the fire, like we was talking about, all the fires are going to be different. And the fire at Armstrong Creek, it was one of those fires that we kind of just had to let it burn itself out because it was too far ahead. We could do nothing with it.
Yeah, I mean, you can only do what you're capable of doing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, what it's kind of a weird way to say this, but no matter what the call is, especially fires, forest fires, same as structure fires, we're called after the fact, right? We're
Yeah,
already two steps behind to begin with.
yeah, for sure.
So I mean, we're now trying to chase our own tail, and trying to control the situation. Sometimes it's you can't control it, right? You could just damage control at that point is really what it is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm not sure. I would not throw that out of the picture because our county, like I said, is very adaptive to
Yeah,
things
and I
like
mean,
that.
yeah, you evolve and you adapt, and like I said, you look at your weaknesses and you say, we have a weak. And sometimes it really just comes down to not having the like a certain department not really having the resources to be able to handle that situation, right? So then,
Oh yeah,
in some departments, like that happens. You may have one or two guys, three guys in a department that are really rock stars at that certain call, but the other guys are not really into that stuff. So that's when you see somebody sees a need and says, "All right, well, we need some kind of of a response team here that we have guys that are top notch. That whenever you got guys coming for that specific reason, these guys they're going to handle it. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
oh absolutely. And I think we know who those guys are in our county. Like we know the guys that are invested in the forest fire stuff, and not every fire department in our county has a side by side. So uh, that plays into a hand of how we handle things. Also, you get those fire departments that got side by sides, and we get them on the road whether we need them or not, so they can help us out.
Hmm. Yeah, man. Like it's it's just seeing a need and then just trying to fill in that gap kind of thing. I think recently when I don't think I know recently in our county we have started a tanker task force. So if there is a structure fire on the west side, then you will have certain departments that if they're not already on the do, then they're assigned to bring a tanker. It's automatically mutually aided tone. They're not sitting there, the IC is not sitting here trying to focus on seven other things and then also think like shit. I need water, so they're trying to eliminate the um you know the cost. You're an officer, you understand how that is. I,
Yeah.
I I don't know, as far as I know, with your chief being paid and stuff. So I don't know what scenarios you've been put into where you've had to be in charge of the scene, but I imagine it. From me seeing firsthand, it's pretty hectic, right? I mean, you got a bunch of different guys asking you what you need to do. You're
Oh
trying to
yeah.
think of resources, you're trying to think 15 steps ahead to try to keep the operation moving. And I think that they're just trying to kind of eliminate some of that chaos.
Yeah. We try to depending on who we get, like I said, it's volunteer, depending on who you get
Hmm.
out. We always try to have um, an operations guy and our IC guy just kind of take the hectic off of
Hmm.
everybody and, kind of spread it out. And, you know, like I said, we have a lot of paid guys. Our deputy chief's a captain at the city of Charleston. Um, we have guys that know what they're doing, and it's very it's more efficient in my eyes if you spread spread out um, the tasks. That way, everybody doesn't get jumbled up, and you don't have too much on your plate. And that's what our chief does. Our chief will assign usually our operations guy, which is our deputy chief or whoever our other officer is, and he'll handle all the other stuff, the incoming units and all that. But he lets us do. He's confident in how we work things, and you know he has our backs and he knows we can get the job done. So he'll let us officers run the operation side of it, and he'll sit back and run the whole run the show.
Right, and I mean that's sometimes how you have to do it, right? It's very hectic when you have one person trying to do 30 different tasks, and and sometimes some of the really important tasks kind of get forgotten about because they're all equally as important, but just I mean I can't say they're all equally as important and then say that some are more important than others because it doesn't make any sense. Complete contradiction. But in my head, I'm there are certain things that are extremely important to make sure they get done, and then there's a few things that follow right behind that. But he's not thinking about every single thing that needs done. Just sometimes that's what I'm saying. Some stuff falls through the you know, through
Oh,
through the cracks, right? Some things fall through the cracks.
absolutely. And
So if you have other people that you're kind of delegating some of your responsibilities to, trying to take some of the, less in your plate, then it's a way smoother operation than if you have one person trying to run a very hectic scene and you have 50 other people going to that one person.
yeah, I firmly agree, and we're moving in the right direction in that aspect of the command structure. Some things we're trying to accomplish in our in our department and our surrounding departments, but one thing that and I'll be the first to tell you that we're not really great at is, and I don't want to sound like I feel like we really lack, and a lot of people lack at this, is just keeping accountability of everybody. Like, where's everybody at? Where do you have these people assigned to things like that? A lot of that, when you got 50 people coming with one person and they're trying to keep track of where everybody's at, what floor they're operating on, things go like that. If something goes wrong, man, that's a lot for one person to be able to handle with things going on.
Oh, dude, put I would put the um the accountability right up there with communication, right? I think that as firefighters, we do a dog shit job of communicating. Awful. I mean, that we know what we're trying to do in our head, but we don't do a good job of explaining to the guys outside what we're doing sometimes. And when you're outside and and you can't see what's going on, then you're just making assumptions at that point. I think that we do a pretty bad job. I mean, as far as my experiences, I mean, we're great. We I don't want to say we're completely awful at it. We could definitely improve on the communication part.
Yeah,
I feel like we definitely try to think that we can read each other's minds sometimes, and obviously we can't. So,
yeah,
so that's something
that's
we need to work at.
for sure.
Um, Well, I think we're getting to that point, man. I think we covered we talked about your department a little bit. Definitely some of the accomplishments that they've had. Definitely made some decent saves, right? And
Yeah,
we kind of talked about your upbringing a little bit, how you got into the fire service, and kind of what um, kind of sculpted you into the kind of officer that you are today. I mean, it's
yeah,
you
absolutely.
um, anybody that you want to kind of go ahead and give any credit to, any kind of shout outs or anything like that, man? Somebody that that to
Oh,
the
I have
guys
a
that kind of put you in the position you are today.
Oh man, I have I have a list of people, and I hate, I'd hate to leave some people off, but just some people off the top of my head, our chief, Benny Filiaggi, he's top notch guy. He's a fireman at heart. He he lives and breathes the fire department. He wants to make the place better. He's done a fantastic job of turning our fire department around. Our deputy chief, Freddie Purdue, um, I've been with him my whole life. His wife used to babysit me when I was a kid, so he was been a
That's awesome.
part of our fire department my whole life. So my when your dad and your babysitter's husband are friends, and he's at the fire station, he works at the fire station. You're just there. You can't anywhere you go, you're still around it. Our chief's son, Michael Filiaggi, one of my best friends. He's also an officer at the city of Charleston. Um, my dad, of course, my uncle Mark Bass, and some guys that I mentioned earlier, like the chief of Anstead Fire Department, Mike Gray. That's one of my go-to guys. I know that if I have something come up, I can go to him, and no matter what the time is, we got hit with a stretch of a stretch of calls, at the start of this year where we lost 8 people in a matter of weeks, just back to back, and we felt like we had like a huge black cloud over our head, and we just could not shake it. And that's my guy. I go to him, and there's hundreds of other people, Joe Christ, I don't, you know, people give me the opportunity, uh, Sparky, there's people that, put me in the right, believe in me and put me in the right, right position. And, like I said, I've been around it my whole life, and, the people that's given me the opportunity and put me in this position, I can't thank enough. And, without them, I wouldn't be in the situation that I am today.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they definitely did a good job, setting you up for success there.
Yes,
All right,
sir.
man. Well, I have a few questions. It's like my famous thing on here. I always throw out 3 questions.
All right.
Um, all right. So, what is one piece of advice that you give someone starting out in the fire service?
Um, my biggest thing that I was always approached with is, you know, surround yourself with people that's going to make yourself better. Surround yourself with the badass fireman that you want to be. Surround yourself with the people who are committed and want to get the job done, and they don't take mediocre as success. We're looking for top notch success, and that's what I would tell new people coming into the fire department. Do the work that other people aren't willing to do, and make it known that you're committed to be that guy.
Right. Yeah. No. I think that's awesome. All right. So what do you think the fire service is going to look like in 10 years?
Huh. That's a question, man.
It is.
Uh,
I
phew,
mean, things are changing, right? I mean,
things
10
are,
years ago, you'd see maybe what a Prius, right? That was
yeah,
about the closest you get to an electric car, and now you can drive down almost probably any street in about any town, and there you could run into 5, 6 different manufactured, electric or hybrid vehicles. I mean, we're not talking about just electric anymore. We're talking about cars that are running on um, you know, like propane. I mean, we're talking about like
yeah,
hydrogen powered car. I mean, we're talking about alternative fueled cars that you've never, we're talking about now town buses that are running on batteries the size of a sedan. I
yeah,
mean,
man. The full circle that everything's made, man. As far as the volunteer fire department service goes,
mhm,
that's a I think that's a question that everybody's trying to figure out at this point. How do we take that next step, man? How do we become, you know, some of these fire departments struggle for funding, and
absolutely.
what is the answer? Does anybody have the answer at this point? How do we go? Are we looking at having to go, more, trying to find routes to go, more paid routes, or getting people on station all the time? I don't know the answer. We talk about it all the time in our fire station. What is the answer for getting more people at our fire department?
Yeah.
How do we handle these incidents and things like that? So that's a question that I really don't have the answer for, and I'd love if somebody can figure it out. I'd love to know, because I'd love to be a part of trying to figure out how we're gonna the volunteer service is going to make it. How are we going to continue to make these things happen? I know we always make it happen, but what happens if you know that day hits, and what do we do? That's
Yeah.
so that's a good question. I really don't. I'd be honest with you. I don't know the answer to it.
That's okay. Yeah, there's no right or wrong answer on that, right? I mean, it's food for your thought, man. I mean, because I mean, you really sit back and you look at it, and I mean, even just the way that the trucks are evolving,
Yeah,
different things are coming out with, that to better assist us. I mean, we're coming out with better gear, coming out with Like I even seen that like Mercedes has came out with the 2 inch that has the same flowability as a 2.5. It's
So
40% lighter,
that's
right? I
funny
mean
that you
that's
that's funny that you say that. Our fire department runs on our new engine that we got last year. We run um, an inch and three quarter in our bumper, our front bumper. We run an inch and three quarter with a solid on one of our cross lays. We run a 2 inch with a 250 gallon a minute, 50 psi nozzle on another. We have another 2 inch off the back with a solid. So we run 2 inch lines. We've ran 2 inch lines for probably the past 10 to 15 years at the Montgomery Fire Department. And like you said, it it's a change for a lot of people. But you roll out here with two people, you're flowing 250 gallons a minute, and 250 gallons a minute puts out a lot of fire.
absolutely. Yeah, put out. Uh, I would say that 250 gallons per minute. I would say with most common house fires, I mean you could definitely get a decent knock, if not almost get a full knock on it, right? I mean,
Oh,
just like I
absolutely.
said, just comes down to your training.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. As far as gear goes, man, you know, gear gets more expensive as it goes. It gets more
right, but it's
expensive
gotten
and more
lighter though,
expensive.
right? In the
Yeah,
weirdest
yeah,
way, is it's actually gotten lighter. I mean, you used to see guys. It's weird how it's came full circle because you used to have guys that were minimally protected with, you know, roll down boots, long coat,
yeah.
and a
The
helmet.
good day, the the old school days of firefighting, the three-quarter boots and the
Yeah.
long coats and the old school leather helmets and
hmm
those are the good firefighting days. But no, I agree. How do these fire departments that barely make it, how do they get people, in gear? You got to apply for grants. Like you said, new engines. You're looking 600, 600, $650,000 minimum.
Yeah.
How do these fire departments make it happen? So,
It's
I would
it's
love to
it, it's
know.
only going up, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I literally hate to say it, but you have some of these manufacturers that I mean, they see the opportunity and they seize on it, right? I mean, and I don't know what the like you said, I don't know what to say about the funding thing. I don't know if it's going to come down to where we're going to have to get some kind of more like state funding to be able to stay afloat. I think that whenever you have guys that are volunteering their time, it's hard to say, "Hey, we know you're running just about every single call, but we also need you this weekend to work the bingo, work the gun bash, work your chicken barbecue, your whatever your hot dog sales, if you're doing pancake dinners, whatever you're doing.
yeah,
It's
man.
hard
That's
enough to get people to show up to calls, let alone show up, to also raise money that they're not really seeing, right? I mean, a lot
yeah.
of that's just going to go pay the bills. So I think it's hard to have guys dedicate all the time to get out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning to go to a house fire, to also say, hey, we know that you're helping out, you're helping the community, but you guys still can't afford that truck payment. We're gonna come take your truck.
Yeah,
You know
like
what I mean? It's
I'm
something's gonna
glad.
have to give, man. It's really gonna have to give is what's gonna have to happen. I don't know if the state's gonna have to step in and say, listen, we see a need that the full volunteers operating on their own, paying their everything with no assistance. I understand, like, we also have a fire levy, and sometimes though that money, I it's not, it helps, don't get me wrong, it really helps, but it's not all that it needs to be, right? It's
Yeah, I don't.
it's becoming a statewide problem, is what I think it is. Maybe even a countrywide problem.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure. I'm sure it is. Like you said, I don't know. You know.
I don't know the whole statistics behind it, but I think that something's going to have to give eventually, is what it is.
Oh yeah, I agree. It has to. I think it's inevitable.
All right, man. I got one more question for you.
All right.
All right. If you could be remembered for one thing in the fire service, what would it be?
Um, man,
So,
I want to be
so
remembered as. Go ahead.
no, no, no. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. I thought you were thinking about it. I was going to say,
All right.
you literally, You could use what you want, but you literally hit the nail on the head earlier, and you said it, and and maybe you'll say the same thing. As like
Yeah,
you
I'm
said
probably
that
going to
you
say the
wanted to
same
be
thing.
that guy whenever you
Yeah.
showed up. That guys knew that you were going to do the job, and that's the same way that I look at myself. As like, what if I was to answer that question? It
Yeah,
would be dependable, right? Like,
that's the route I'm going. Like I want to just be remembered as, the person that does the right thing. Um, they know that they can count on me. They know I'm going to give it my all, no matter what it is. I'm going to try to make it happen to the best of my ability, and I want to be known to do the right thing. If I'm in this, I want to do it the right way. Uh, so that's just the way I want to. That's the way I want to approach anything. It's the way I was raised. I'm full. I'm fully into this. I'm giving it my all, and that's what I feel like most of the people in our area that know me that I respond to the instance we know, they know that they can ask me to do it, and I'm gonna get the job done, and I'm not gonna ask any questions.
yeah, that's the same way that I like to think of myself. Is that whenever I show up, I'm 100%. Right? Like if somebody gives me a task, I it may not be done the best perfect way that anybody could ever imagine that it's going to get done, but like I will 1000% do it to the best of my abilities. And I mean,
Absolutely.
and I just try to give 110%. Like whenever I show up, I don't ever want to be known as that guy that they're like, oh fuck, Johnny's here. Like
Yeah,
that's
just
not what I want. People to have a sign of relief when I'm there. That like, all right, man. Like, well, I know that I got some pretty solid guys here. That if some shit really pops off, like we're okay.
yeah, like making a difference, man. Just making a difference. That's what I feel like you come into. Leave it better than you found it, but you want to make a difference, and I feel like that. I do my best at that. I try to help out when I can, and I really, really think that, that if they ask me to do something, they know I'm gonna get the job done. That's what it comes down to.
Nah, man, I definitely agree with you, and I think that's probably one of the most important things is like just being dependable, right? I
Yep.
mean, having guys be able to rely on you.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Well, I think we're time to wrap it up. So
Yeah, man. I
I
appreciate you having me on
no,
here. No,
I
that's
really
awesome.
appreciate you reaching out, man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
If you got some suggestions later for some other people, you think that would be good fit on the show, you want to go ahead and reach out or have them reach out to me, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I got like I said, I got a lot of good guys that, you can, I seen some guys that were commented on there earlier that, some people posted on there, Robbie
Hmm.
Bailey, uh, he's a good friend of ours, deputy chief of fire marshal,
Hmm.
they commented, some, Mike Gray and Tracy Gray. Those are two of the people that I was telling you about that are in charge of our special operations rope
Hmm.
team. Um, there's some full blown, just solid guys and that's been around it a while that know what they're doing. Those are good people to reach out to. They would be more than I'm sure they would be more than happy. And Mike Gray, he is one of the guys that he's one of the guys along with my uncle Mark Bass who built our training center from the scratch. They designed it, and you know those would be some solid people to reach out to.
Yeah, man. I definitely look forward to it. Like I said, I'd love to keep this going for as long as I can. I mean, I don't do it for myself. I don't get anything out of this other than
Yeah.
just to bring guys on here and let them tell their story. I think it's great to show the pride and and really highlight the guys of the fire service in West Virginia that
Oh, absolutely.
that make the fire service great here. That was one of the main focuses that I had, is that I didn't want to do a national it's not even a firefighter podcast. That's like a whole misconception that I have some people like say is like this is not at all just a firefighter podcast. That if you have anybody that's in law enforcement,
Hmm.
anybody that's in EMS, also I'd love to have them on. It's just that I have more firefighters reach out. I think mainly just because we like running our mouth the most is what I
Yeah,
think
just
it
like
is. Yeah,
shooting the shit, just
yeah,
talking. Yeah.
yeah,
No,
and so that's what it is. But if you have anybody that's in law enforcement, yeah, EMS, anything like that, dispatchers, I also include dispatchers as first responders. I'd love to have them on and let them tell their story.
Absolutely, man. And like I said, I appreciate you having me. It was a good time to sit back and talk. And anytime you need anything or you need anything done, you just holler at me. I
Well, thanks,
appreciate
man.
that. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful night, and everybody, thank you for tuning in. Take care.
All right, you too.